today we're looking at Module 3, Lesson 1. The lesson before this we reviewed percents and our percent boxes. In this lesson we're just taking it the next step and we're looking at percent of change. And we have some vocabulary words that go along with percent of change. So the first one is percent change, which is an amount of change expressed as a percent of the original amount. And when we have a percent of change, we're looking at either a percent of increase or a percent of decrease. So anytime something changes, you have a change in an amount, you also have a change in percent. And so the definition for percent increase is an amount of increase expressed as a percent of the original amount, and then percent decrease is just the opposite of that, which is an amount of decrease expressed as a percent of the original amount. And we see this all around us in the real world. And some examples of percent increase we see, like when our grades our grades go up, we have see an increase. We see an increase in our overall total when we have to pay for taxes, when we have to pay fees, we have to pay a tip. We see our numbers go up when we have to pay interest. And so all those things, we talk about markups, all those things are an increase. And a decrease is like a discount, or anytime, like say, we talked about the stock market yesterday, when we have a decline in sales or in the stock market, anytime something's going down, that would be a decrease. And so because this section is considered facts you need to know, we're going to continue using a percent box. But our percent labels are going to be kind of different than our original is and of labels. And far as for a percent of change, what we're going to have here, I'm going to zoom in so I have more space, is that the top box is going to be our amount of change. So the amount of change, how much has changed over the OG or the original amount. And so it's important, we're going to use this same percent box over and over again. So it's important for us to remember that box there. So with these notes, we've tried to really pay attention to letting you know what it's about. And so here you'll see that this section, I'm trying to get my highlighter here, that this section is about finding percent of change. So anytime you see a problem asking for you to find the percent of change, you come back to this problem here and it'll give you a really good example of that. So here we have in problem 1A, it says that Janice earns $7 per hour, and after 6 months her hourly rate has increased to $7.70. What is the percent increase? So I see the word percent, so I know I'm needing a percent box. And because it's a percent increase, I know something has changed, something's gotten greater. And so I know I'm going to use a percent change box. So I can go ahead and make this box up because I know I'm going to end up needing it. Okay. And so we've got a few things here that we need to pull out and pay attention to so that we can fill this box in. So the first thing is we need to know what our original amount is. Does it tell us what our original amount was? Originally, Janice was earning $7. Now, after 6 months, she's earning $7.70. We need to know, when we solve one of these problems, how much change has occurred. So the amount of change, we would just end up subtracting the two, finding the distance between the two numbers, which ends up being 70 cents. Okay, just like you'd want to find the difference between how much, if you started at $5 and now you're up to $7, how much change was that? There was a $2 difference there. Okay, so now we've got these three important pieces of information, and now we can plug them into our box. And so I'm going to zoom in here so we can see our box a little bit better. The OG stands for our original amount. Okay, and that's always going to go on the bottom there. Our original amount. And here is going to be our amount that it's changed. How much change has happened. Amount of change. All right, and then this box is still going to be the percentage portion. So our original amount was $7. It had a complete change of 70 cents. So from there, we could cross multiply and find the percentage of change. So I would cross multiply 70 cents times 100, and then we're going to divide that by 7. So if we plug that into our calculator, 70 cents times 100 divided by 7, we get x equals 10%. So if we come down here, it says her rate of pay increased, because it went up, by 10%. Okay, so it's the same process. We just have an extra step here with our change box. Okay, so let's turn over to the next page. Okay, it's still looking at that problem. It says Pizza King decided to decrease the price in a large pizza. The original price of the large pizza was $16. Now they're only $12. What is the percent decrease in the cost of a large pizza? So once again, we've got some helpful hints of things that we need to pull apart. Because I see that I'm looking for percent decrease, I know I'm going to be using a percent box, and because it says decrease, I know there's a change happening, so I need to use my percent of change box. So I'm going to have my amount of change here, and I'm going to have the original amount here. And so I need to pull some information out. I know the original price was $16 and the new price was $12. So if I went from 16 to 12, my overall amount of change, 16 minus 12, gives me 4. So it's gone down by $4. And now we can start plugging some of this information in. So my original amount was 16. Had a total change of 4. I went down by 4. Now I can cross multiply and divide to figure out what percentage of change took place. So I can do 4 times 100 divided by 16, and I get that x equals 25%. So the overall cost of the pizza went down or decreased by 25%. Okay, so hopefully so far we're good. So now we're looking at, that was finding the percent part. This is finding the amount of change part. Okay, it says the population of cheetahs decreased. That's important to know. Decrease means go down. 30% over the last 18 years. If there was originally, that's important for us to know, 12,000 cheetahs, how many cheetahs are there now? Okay, so here we've got a few different things going on. I see a percent sign, so I automatically know that I'm going to use a percent box. I also know that there's a change taking place, and so I'm going to be using a percent of change box. So I can go ahead and set that up here in part B, because that's the method I'm going to use. Amount of change over the original. And I can start putting some pieces together here. So part A says, what percent decrease in the cheetah population? So there was a 30% decrease, which could plug in, because it's a percent, we automatically know it can go in the percent section of our box here. And we also know the original population, or the original number, was 12,000. So the original can go in our OG original box. So 12,000, sorry, y'all, my screen keeps moving on me. So now I can figure out how much change does that 30% represent. So now I'm going to cross multiply 12,000 times 30 and then divide it by 100. So if we plug that into our calculator, we have 12,000 times 30, so that's lots of zeros there, divided by 100, and we find out that x equals 3,600. So that means the population has changed by 3,600 cheetahs. And if you go back, it decreased, which means, see where it says a decrease? That means the population went down. It lost 3,600 cheetahs. So to figure out the new amount of cheetahs, we have to then go, okay, I started with 12,000. I subtracted 3,600. So then that leaves me with, if we do our subtraction here, it leaves me now with only 8,400 cheetah. So that means that there are roughly, and that's a small little box, I'm going to draw an arrow here, only 8,400 cheetahs left, which is kind of sad. But anyways, that's how we can do that. Alright, so we can keep on going, and here we're still finding the amount. It says Cassidy is changing the size of the garden shown to fit more vegetables. She plans to increase the width by 25%. So we're increasing, we're changing, and we have a percent. So we automatically know that we're going to be using a percent of change box. Part A wants us to know what will the new width be for the garden box. So the original width, based off of the picture, is 8 feet. We want to know what the new one's going to be if we increase the box. So if I use my percent of change box, always labeling it, want the amount of change over the original. We have to start with what we know. What can we fill in with these boxes? Well, I know I have 25%, and it can go in the percent section of my box. I know I have the original amount, which is 8, which means I'm looking for the amount of change. And from there, I'll be able to find the new width. So we can multiply 8 times 25, which is going to give me 200, divided by 100, which will leave me with 2. So x equals 2. So what we're doing here is we're going to increase the width of this garden box by 2 feet. So down here we can say that the new width is the original. Because it's increased, we're adding 2 feet, which means the new width is going to be 10 feet. So here in part B it says how much greater is the new area. So remember, area of a rectangle is length times the width. Now our length didn't change, but our width, it did change. So we can just use the information that we have now found, whereas the original was 8 by 12, which will give us 96 feet squared. Now we have a new area of the length staying the same, but a new width of 10. And so when we do 10 times 12, we end up with 120 feet squared. So the new area is 120 square feet. Oh, well, let's reread that right there. It says the new area is blank feet, square feet greater. So the new one was 120, the original was 96. So how much greater is it? So another way to figure out how much greater is to simply subtract 120 minus 96, which should give me roughly 24 square feet greater. So at face value it looks kind of scary, but that box really does help us. So we're going to keep going here, and it says find the range of values. So sometimes this is really important because your percent can be what's changing, and you want to find a range. And when we're talking about a range, we're looking for like the max amount it could be and the minimum amount it can be. So here it says a machine cuts lumber at 8-foot planks. The company regulation allows the lengths to vary. That's going to be our key word here. To vary means to arrange or to change by 0.5%, which can be either an increase or a decrease of 0.5%. So it can be 0.5% less or 0.5% more than the original 8 feet. So they want us to find what that range would be. So like what is acceptable here. So to do that, we want to find what is the length in feet that the planks are allowed to vary by. So we want to know, okay, well, it can vary by 0.5%. So how much is that 0.5%? So if I look here, vary means change, right? So we still need our percent of change box. We're going to zoom in so you can see it a little bit better. So we're still having the amount of change, which is what we're looking for, over the original amount. We're going to plug in the information that we know. We know it can change by 0.5%, and we know that the original is 8. So that means the only box left we're looking for is the amount of change. How much can it change? How much less can it be? How much greater can it be? So we're going to cross multiply 8 times 0.5, and then we're going to divide that by 100. Okay, so original 8 feet times 1/2 divided by 100 gives me 0.04 of a foot. So it only can vary by a teeny tiny amount. So here it says what is the length of the shortest allowable plank and what is the longest allowable plank. So what we have to do is it can either, to figure out the shortest, it's supposed to be 8, but it can also be less than 8 by 0.4 hundredths of a foot. And so when we subtract that, we get 7.96, which is the smallest it can be, and then it can be a little bit over, which means it can be 8 400 feet at the maximum. So they really want it to be 8, but it could vary between those two numbers. And you're going to have a couple of these on your homework, in your 3.1 homework. Alright, so now what I want you to do is I want you to take a second and then you're going to practice on your own problems 7 through 12, in which you are creating percent of change boxes and you are finding percent of change boxes. And then I want you to come back and check your work. Alright, so once you have answered, you should be able to double check your answers as I have here. Notice that I showed my work for each one of them. My boxes are labeled. Notice that my amount of change, I've showed you that you are subtracting the beginning number minus the ending number. Your beginning number is always your original. And that if you go from bigger to smaller, then that means you're decreasing. But if you go from a smaller number to a greater number, you're obviously increasing. And so that's all that we have.